Order. Before we come to justice questions, in light of some of the discourse on social media in the last week on matters related to criminal justice, I'd like to remind members how we treat each other, and judgments we make are important to set the tone for national debate. I would ask members to consider carefully what is in good taste or bad taste. As set out in the Speakers' Conference on the Security of MPs, Candidates and Elections, we encourage everyone to engage positively in the political process with courtesy, respect in discussions and grace and understanding towards those whom we may disagree. Right, I now turn to questions. Secretary of State for Justice, Bob Blackman.
Mr. Speaker, question number 1.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will know that I'm making a statement shortly after orals. The government is committed to human rights at home and abroad, but to retain public confidence, the European Convention on Human Rights and other instruments must evolve to face modern challenges. Domestically, we will clarify how convention rights operate in immigration cases, and I'm engaging across Europe on wider reform.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Lord Chancellor for that answer. Clearly, the public are frustrated by the fact that foreign criminals are not deported, and that people that come here illegally are not deported, and that human rights laws are used to prevent that from happening. I understand that his predecessor, the Home Secretary, now is considering changes to the laws that may happen. But I wonder if that is the case, could he not actually take my right honourable friend, the Shadow Lord Chancellor's bill, and put that into law so we can actually get on with the job of deporting people that shouldn't be here?
So say.
Well, the right honourable gentleman is right. People are claiming Article 8 right, particularly, and using domestic law to thwart removal to their countries, and that's right. And that's why it's important that we deal with that domestically and come forward with legislation to deal with that. But I do remind him that this government is deporting more foreign criminals than ever before, over 5,000 just in our first year in office. We are taking this seriously and we're acting.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because of our proud history and our commitment to the rule of law, the UK is a global leader on legal services, with our courts garnering respect across the world. What does the Minister think the impact would be on our reputation should we begin ripping up our international agreements and our commitments to the very rule of law that we as a nation helped shape?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, because he's right to remind the House that legal services, the rule of law, the importance of this jurisdiction for companies and individuals seeking recourse actually brings £47 billion a year into our economy. And that's right, it's right we seek common course with countries who are exercises we are, like Denmark and Italy, on how the European Convention of Human Rights is being thwarted. But we do that in a steady, progressive way, and we certainly recognise the importance of the ECHR.
Father of the House, Edward Lee.
I serve on the Council of Europe, and it's a perfectly worthwhile assembly, and the convention framed, shortly after the Second World War was designed to counter Nazism, frankly. It wasn't designed to protect illegal migrants into a country. Now, we all know that this crisis is sapping belief in government. Why doesn't the very reasonable Justice Secretary work with the even more reasonable Shadow Justice Secretary and come before the House and say that we will get a temporary derogation from the Refugee Convention, the Convention of Human Rights, and that we will detain and deport anybody who enters this country illegally and will solve the crisis?
No, sir.
Well, I know that the Right Honourable Gentleman is hugely experienced. He will know that it's important that we don't do anything, for example, that might undermine the Good Friday Agreement, where the ECHR is fundamental and important. He rightly mentions the Refugee Convention. That sits with the United Nations. I will be going to Strasbourg shortly, where I'll be taking up many of these issues.
Whereas, Mr Speaker, there are perhaps other unforeseen consequences of leaving the ECHR, including on the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. Does the Minister agree with me that opposition parties wishing to leave the ECHR either haven't considered the impacts of leaving on Cornish national minority status, or they have, but just don't care about the Cornish?
So stay.
Well, he will know that there were promises made in relation to the debate that we had on exiting the European Union, and all sorts of things were promised by many colleagues opposite, and they were not delivered. And it feels a little bit like we're on repeat in relation to this. There are areas of immigration where we do have to do things domestically. There are areas where we want to work with European colleagues who also are concerned at the way that laws are being thwarted. But please let us not undermine a fundamental that was actually instituted by one of the heroes of this Parliament, Winston Churchill.
Shadow Secretary of State Robert Jemry.
Mr Speaker, Fawad Awale is an extremist and double murderer who later took a prison officer hostage and demanded the release of the radical cleric Abu Qatada. He is the definition of evil. And yet, the Justice Secretary's Department is now set to pay him compensation, as his ECHR rights have apparently infringed because he couldn't associate with monsters like those who killed Lee. Ensure that not a single penny of taxpayers' money is handed over to this man, and if he won't, and he puts our membership of the ECHR above the interests of the British people, will he put his money where his mouth is and pay any so-called compensation himself?
So stay.
I know that the Right Honourable Gentleman is always keen to get headlines, but he knows that the consequences of judgments and what then impacts on government and any payments made have been an issue for successive governments for the entire time that he and I have been on the planet. He knows that we're committed to the ECHR, offering asylum to those who genuinely are fleeing torture and execution, but he knows too that on the issues that I referred to earlier, Article 8 particularly, and what we can do domestically, and how we can work with European colleagues, we are seeking to do that. So this is not the time to start revising decisions that have effectively been made by our courts.
Mr Roberts.
Question number 2.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In line with HMPPS Welsh Language Scheme, HMPPS offers prisoners, people on probation and members of the public the right to choose whether to use English or Welsh in their dealings with us. We recognise that enabling the prisoners to use their preferred language is a matter of good practice, not a concession, recognising that prisoners can express their views and needs better in their preferred language.
The Welsh Language Act of 1993 places a duty on public bodies to treat English and Welsh languages as equal in Wales. The Minister mentions the HMPPS Welsh Language Scheme, which there is a new scheme, and it commits to publishing an annual report on its progress. I've already contacted the Ministry of Justice about this and about adherence to the Act. However, considering that the previous iteration of the scheme failed in this respect, publishing only a single report, and that only following a complaint under the 1993 Act, what assurances can he give that the new scheme will have any real effect?
Minister.
I thank the member for her vital question. It's absolutely right that I'll follow up on the correspondence that she sent to the Ministry of Justice. I haven't seen that myself, Mr Speaker. As I set out before, the policy that the Ministry of Justice implements is one that values the Welsh language and will continue to do that.
Ian Solomon.
Number 3, please, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
We're determined to back our hard-working probation staff by investing up to £700 million by the final year of the spending review and investing an initial £8 million in new technology to reduce administrative burdens. We'll also recruit 1,300 trainee probation officers in 2025-6, in addition to more than 1,000 that we recruited last year.
It's on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In July 2024, inspectors rated Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Probation Service inadequate, with major leadership failures and child safeguarding assessed as adequate in just 28% of cases. The action plan committed to increasing probation officer staffing by 87% by March 2026, but the National Audit Office has now revealed that the probation service has underestimated staffing requirements by 34%, which implies that the service in Cambridgeshire has been operating at only half the staff needed. So, given that miscalculation, will the Secretary of State commit to revised, accurate staffing targets for Cambridgeshire and reassure my constituents that child safeguarding will not be compromised as the service tries to manage with inadequate resources?
State.
Well, Cambridgeshire is a part of the country I know well. I spent 7 years of my life in Peterborough. I will look closely at the issue, and I'll ask the Prisons Minister to meet with him to discuss how we move forward.
Catherine Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The probation service plays a vital role in our justice system and is integral to ensuring that community sentences are effective and our communities are kept safe. The Conservatives' part privatisation reforms were disastrous for our probation service. What is this government doing to ensure that our probation officers are properly supported in carrying out their vital jobs?
State.
Well, my honourable friend is exactly right. The decisions that were made under the last government by the then Justice Secretary, Chris Grayling, were catastrophic for a wonderful, wonderful service. And we're now in the business of rebuilding the probation service. And I've been very, very pleased to visit probation workers in Kent, in Chatham recently, and in Islington recently. And one of the things that they're raising is their caseload. In Kent, they were trialling our transformation fund money that is introducing AI that can help them do what they want to do, which is face-to-face, and reduce those caseloads. And I want to see that rolled out across the country.
So, Secretary of State Robert Chapman.
Thank you. Currently, if a child sex offender is released from prison, the police and probation service can track them on the sex offender register. But if a child abuser is released from prison, the authorities have no register to track them with. There's a glaring gap in the system. Paula Hudgell has been fighting to fix the law after her adopted son Tony was abused so badly he lost his legs. She's been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she says this campaign is the fire in her belly. Paula is truly inspirational. We're backing her campaign. Will the Secretary of State take our amendment or bring forward his own and get this change over the line for Paula, for Tony, and to protect children now and into the future?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for raising this issue. I can tell him that the Minister for Victims met with Paula today, and we are keen to support her campaign.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Jess Bramford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like much of the justice system, the probation service is buckling under the strain after a decade of being undervalued by the previous government. So the injection of £700 million by 2028 was welcomed last year, but it's yet to be felt on the front line of probation, which is estimated to be 10,000 staff members short. And with the sentencing bill and a presumption against short sentences bound to put additional pressure on the probation service, what is the Secretary of State doing to ensure that the service can work efficiently to properly manage offenders in the community?
So State.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for raising this issue. It was important that we exceeded our target of 1,000 officers last year. We have to get those 1,300 officers in place. The 700 million must be spent by the end of the spending review. I do think it's important that we bear down on getting AI across the service and we introduce that new technology, because it's only by doing that that probation officers can do what they want to do, which is get back to face and that personalised care.
Bradley Thomas.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The sentencing bill will create new powers to apply tougher restrictions on offenders' movements, including the creation of restriction zones and new restrictive licence conditions for probation. This will mean being able to curtail offenders' freedom on licence and measures for the courts to use as requirements on community sentences.
Bradley Thomas.
Mr Speaker, residents living in villages across North Worcestershire in my constituency of Bromsgrove are often victims of crime which originates from urban areas including Birmingham. What message would the Minister send to my constituents who want a reassurance that the probation service is being strengthened in order that repeat offenders who evade supervision through crossing jurisdiction are not falling through the cracks as a result of lack of police sharing data?
Minister.
I'm grateful to the honourable member's question. It's absolutely vital that across jurisdiction and across different areas there is better information sharing from probation services and the police. Probation services, as the Justice Secretary has just commented on, is in need of investment. That's why we're investing £750 million, a 45% increase, and we'll continue to invest in our probation service to make sure that his constituents are reassured in the future.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I pay tribute to the hard-working police officers and probation service workers in my constituency of Harlow, which people will be aware is on the Essex-Hertfordshire border, so I recognise some of the issues that the previous speaker has mentioned. Can I ask what work the Minister is doing working with probation services in areas like Harlow that do suffer this problem to address this issue readily and ensure that actually everybody is treated fairly, no matter their geographical location?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman is absolutely right. Our probation service do an outstanding job day in, day out. They are often the hidden heroes of our public services and they deserve great credit.
Ben Maguire.
Question number 5, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Legal aid can be a lifeline and should be available to those who need it wherever they happen to live. This government has made substantial new investment in legal aid, both in criminal legal aid, £92 million additional a year, and also in civil legal aid, where we're investing an additional £20 million a year.
Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that response. Would the Minister please join me in congratulating Cood solicitors who provide a weekly pro bono surgery to my constituents in Bodmin? Firms like Cood's face, in their own words, so much unnecessary bureaucracy and hoops to jump through when it comes to providing legal aid. I understand the government, as the Minister highlights, some progress has been made towards making the financial investment that's needed in the system, but is she also aware of the incredible burden of this needless bureaucracy, and will she please commit to simplifying public funding contracts?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for his question and I commend all of those lawyers that provide pro bono support to their clients. It is incredibly commendable. But of course, that ultimately is a sticking plaster and no substitute for a well-functioning legal aid system. That's why, as well as increasing fees, we're also investing in the transformation of the IT digital platform to enable providers to cut through some of that red tape.
In Labour.
Number 6, sir.
Minister.
This government is committed to access to justice, and that involves supporting people from every social background to uphold their rights. As I said earlier, we're investing in civil legal aid. We've introduced the greatest expansion in a decade of legal aid through the Hillsborough Law, and we continue to provide financial support for law centres and citizens' advice so people, wherever they come from, whatever their background, can access legal support.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Labour government's investment in legal aid and legal services is hugely welcome. However, expert analysis show categorically that young people from more deprived backgrounds find it extremely difficult to access justice. Many people from constituencies like mine and Blythe and Ashton are very much unaware of what might be available to them when they're most needed. Can the Minister assure me that everything possible is being done to ensure that our people are acutely aware of what is available to them in order to access the justice they so rightly deserve and in many cases they urgently require?
Minister.
He raises a very important issue. If you don't know your rights, you can't enforce your rights. And so raising awareness is incredibly important. It's important that we expand access to legal support where people are living their lives. So online, the service for Advice Now, where people can access, especially young people, digital legal advice, is a vitally important component of that.
Franklin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm really interested to hear the Minister's answers to the previous question, but true access to justice must include those still imprisoned under legal tests since ruled wrong, including many young people from marginalised communities convicted under joint enterprise. Will the Minister and the Government consider adopting the review mechanism in my sentencing bill amendment, which will create a statutory process for review of convictions so they too can access justice?
The review of criminal law in that area is something that is incredibly delicate. It's something that we need to look at in line with common law and the case law, and it's something that we're keeping under review.
Ella Morgan.
Number 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Behind the backlogs in our courts, behind each and every one of those case statistics, there is a human story. And there is no doubt that the delays in our criminal courts are taking their toll on victims and all participants in the criminal justice system. But we are gripping the situation by investing in greater number of Crown Court sitting days, additional investment in criminal legal aid, and of course the review that we've commissioned from Sir Brian Leveson, because what is going to be required is once-in-a-generation reform of our criminal justice system, and we'll be providing our response to that review in due course.
Minister, I think it's grouped. Minister.
Forgive me. Forgive me, Mr. Speaker. I was going to answer both questions 7 and 22 together, and I think you have my answer on the backlogs to that.
Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for her answer. And the situation she describes is similar to one that I'm about to describe, where a constituent of mine got in touch about a case of historical sexual abuse. They bravely reported that in 2018, and after years of waiting, a trial date was set for this May, only for it to be put back again until July 2027, 9 years after first reporting. And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you can imagine the toll that's taken on my constituents' mental health and well-being. I would urge the Minister to progress at speed with her reform of the court service, and particularly address the problems in Shropshire, where there are significant issues with the Crown Court and Magistrates' Court service.
Minister.
Well, I'm incredibly sorry to hear about your constituents' experience, and I want to reiterate my sympathies. You've articulated there in that case precisely why it is vital that we pursue this reform. Timeliness is an essential ingredient of fairness, and the state's obligation is to deliver fair trials. That's why we will do whatever it takes to bear down on the backlog as we bring forward our response to Sir Brian Leveson's review.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answer. I've heard from several constituents who are victims of domestic abuse how the delays inherited from the previous government in family court, particularly for financial settlement orders, has compounded the traumatic experience of victims of domestic abuse, including ongoing financial harm and detriment. So could the Minister set out what this government is doing to reduce those delays and in particular support victims of domestic abuse through our court system?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for his question, and we are committed to improving the timeliness, not just in criminal courts, but in family courts as well, and providing better support to victims of domestic abuse, who we know make up many of the participants in that litigation. The Pathfinder model is working. It resolves cases faster, and it offers specialist domestic abuse support. We've expanded the Pathfinder model to 5 additional court areas, and we are continuing that expansion into 2026. He will be happy to know that that includes Hampshire, where I understand his constituency is based.
I could also help with the reopening of Chorley Court, Minister. Jonathan Brash.
Number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary.
It is right that the IPP sentence was abolished. The number of unreleased IPP prisoners fell to 946 as of the 30th of September 2025, which was a reduction of 14% compared to the previous year. Legislative changes were implemented that we implemented have reduced the number of people serving IPP sentences in the community to around 2/3.
Brash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Terry Rowley received an IPP sentence on the 8th of February 2008. His minimum tariff was set at 1 year and 126 days. That was 6,486 days ago, almost 18 years, and he remains in prison. No one disputes the seriousness of his offences, but the issue for Terry and his family is one of equal justice. Someone sentenced to the same crime today would not receive an IPP. So does the Secretary of State accept that this raises fundamental concerns about the fairness and equality before the law for those serving under the IPP regime, and what steps can he take to fix it?
Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. Can I say that I recognise the challenges that exist for Terry and his family. We are determined to support those in prison to progress towards safe and sustainable releases but understandably it can't be in a way that undermines public protection. We're not giving up on any individual serving an IPP sentence. We will ensure that each one gets the support and the access to risk education and risk reduction work that they need, and I'll ensure that Terry is receiving all of the support that he needs.
Alexis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the government's assessment of the current protocols regarding the comprehensive risk assessments, and can the public be assured that the existing policies on public protection sentences are effectively safeguarding the community?
Secretary.
Well, that's why we've got to put public protection first, and there has to be a robust risk assessment. We require the parole board to make very sensitive assessments, particularly. People cannot leave prison unless we are confident that they are not going to be going on and committing further crimes, and that's the assessment that we ask the parole board and others in the prison system to make.
Very clearly.
Question number 9, please.
Minister.
The government recognises that pension age is an important issue for frontline staff, and I recognise trade unions who represent the views of their members. Officials met with the POA earlier in the autumn to discuss pension age and will continue to engage with them on this important issue.
Marie Kelly-Foy.
Speaker, the Prison Officers Association recently launched their 68 is too late pensions report based on the largest members survey in POA history. The report is a heartbreaking read, with prison officers describing how unrealistic and frankly cruel it is to expect them to walk the landings until they're almost 70 years old, and the effect that this has on morale. With 3 prisons in Durham, I often hear support for this important campaign. Does the Minister accept that at the heart of the prison's crisis, there's a crisis in how prison staff are treated by the state, and that by resolving the pensions injustice should be a top priority for any government serious about fixing our jails?
Minister.
I'm very grateful for my honourable friend's question, and let me take this opportunity to praise and thank the prison officers who do a remarkable job in often trying and appalling circumstances. As I said previously, the government will continue to engage with the relevant and recognised unions as well as prison officers themselves, and I know the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary is meeting with the POA in the coming days.
Mr. Speaker, given the existing retirement age for prison officers and the increase in the number of violent offenders in prison, along with the increase in illegal substances getting into prison, would you not agree with me that it is time to urgently review that age at which prison officers retire, as many of those older prison officers are looking to retire?
As I've already said, Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely right that we'll continue to have those discussions with the relevant trade unions, but let me be absolutely clear on behalf of the government. We understand that conditions and the work that prison officers do is getting harder, and we are in the business of trying to help them.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supporting victims of child sexual exploitation and abuse is a priority for this government. The Ministry of Justice funds police and crime commissioners across England and Wales, as well as over 60 specialist sexual violence organisations which provide local support services for all victims, including victims of technology-assisted child sexual abuse.
Elsie Blundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answer. We all know of the increasing and sinister use of technology when it comes to the appalling sexual abuse of children and young people. To address this, will the Minister consider extending the unduly lenient sentence scheme to include all taxi offences and commit to a ban on these technologies that generate deepfake and sexually abusive images of children?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that important question. Parliament intended the unduly lenient sentencing scheme to be an exceptional power, and any expansion of that scheme must be carefully considered. However, she will be aware that we had a recent debate as the Victims in Courts Bill was on the floor of the House going forward, and I have heard the strength of feeling of this House and campaigners regarding this, and I am looking at it closely.
Calvin Lockhart.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Northern Ireland Police Ombudsman reported that the PSNI's cyber crimes team lacked the capacity and capability to manage the threat posed by prolific online sex offender Alexander McCartney. His abuse led to the tragic death of 12-year-old Samoran Thomas in 2018, and he targeted at least 70 other children. Can the Justice Secretary confirm what steps are being taken to ensure cybercrime teams across all of the UK are properly resourced to deal with online child sexual exploitation?
Well, the whole House will be shocked by that horrific case, and all of our thoughts are with all of the victims of this case. It's an important case which draws attention to the nature and proliferation of these crimes. I know the Safeguarding Minister has spoken to the PSNI regarding this. Through the Online Safety Act, there are powers. However, I know she represents a devolved nation, and it is imperative because these crimes have no borders, and all victims deserve protection. And I'm sure this will be taken up by the Home Office.
Dr. Ross Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 11.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A victim of an environmental crime can expect to receive the relevant services as set out in the Victims Code, and Police and Crime Commissioners receive annual grant funding from the Ministry of Justice to commission support for victims of all crime types. I would refer the Honourable Member for South Cotswold, who I know is an avid campaigner in this area, to my ministerial colleagues in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who would be able to answer more fully on how we tackle environmental crimes specifically.
Dr. Ross